Today's notes are on succession. Succession is the process of gradual change over a species in a habitat. And this can occur both on land, or the word we use for that, and that you'll see on the SOL is called terrestrial, and in water, or aquatic. So there are two types of succession. The first one we're going to talk about is called primary succession. And this begins with only abiotic factors. So if we take a look over here on the left side, we see there are only abiotic factors. A in front of the word biotic means not. Bio means living. So abiotic factors means non-living factors. So if we take a look over here, we have rock and we have air, both abiotic factors. And what happens is they continue to grow until a climax community is reached. And you can see over here, a climax community is going to be a full-grown community. And community is a bunch of biotic factors living together, so different types of species. So you can see over here, we start with bare rock, and then eventually these things called lichens form, which are what we call pioneer species. So you can see these small little organisms on the rocks. And those small organisms, what they do is that they start to break down that rock into soil. And the more soil there is, the more life that the environment is able to hold. So you can see down here, there's a little bit of soil, and because of that, small organisms can grow here, so very small shrubs. And as the soil becomes deeper, it's able to hold bigger organisms. So you can see over here on the far right side in the climax community, where the biggest trees are, we have the biggest roots. Okay, and that's going to give us the biggest trees because there's more soil to support that type of organism. Now the question is, how do these organisms, these shrubs, grasses, and trees, how do they get there? Well, what happens is once these lichens start to break down this rock into soils, birds fly over top, and what they do is they usually eat seeds. Now, usually they carry those seeds back to their nest, so as they're flying over top, they sometimes drop these seeds. Another way that seeds can be dispersed is by wind. So as soon as the breeze blows, it's going to blow more and more seeds into the area. So the point of primary succession, primary means first. This is the first time that the environment was created. So we started from rocks, abiotic factors, and eventually the pioneer species created more and more soil to give us a full community of biotic or living organisms. Two key terms we need to learn about today are pioneer species. Pioneer species, again, are those lichens that form on the rocks, and they break down those abiotic rocks to form the soil. So these are the very first organisms to an environment. So they're the first biotic factor or living factor. The second term is climax community. Climax community is the finished product of succession. It's the final stable community. So it's very large and complex, has maples and oak trees. It has a wide variety of different species all living together.
Let's talk about succession in Virginia. So just like before, we have our pioneer species, and these are going to be the first organisms to the environment. Typically in Virginia, we're going to have annual plants and perennials. Annuals are plants that you have to regrow from a seed every year, and perennials are the plants that live more than 2 years, so they come back in the spring. And then you can see we start to have bigger organisms start to form. These are going to be things like your shrubs and your pines, maybe small, young oak and hickory trees. These are known as our softwoods. They have a fast rate of growing. They're generally pretty small. There's a lot of needles typically. And some examples would be softwood, cedar, juniper, and pine trees. Then in our climax community in Virginia, we have our oak and hickory trees. And this is our stable community that we have, where we have large plants and animals in our community. The hardwood, these are our bigger trees. They have a slower rate of growth, and they usually shed their leaves over a long period of time over the autumn and winter. And again, my examples would be hickory, oak, maple, and walnut.
So here's an example of an aquatic environment. So succession, primary succession in the aquatic form. First, we start up here at the top where there's a big open lake of water. You can see there's land all around it, but in the inside there is water. And what happens is, in step 2, when it rains, there's an increase of floating particles that start to accumulate the sediment in here. And because of that, it starts to build up, making that lake smaller and smaller. Now, because there's more soil, we can start to grow aquatic plants. You can see here that there are some plants on the inside, which is going to lead to more and more fish. And then eventually that accumulation is going to fill up all the water, and then what will happen is it's a little bit swampy in the middle, but we'll be able to support full life, and eventually it will look like the rest of this environment. So the second type of succession is called secondary succession, and this is going to be when there's a second environment started. So some sort of natural disaster or man-made event is going to cause succession to happen. So you can see right here, there was a full big trees, and what happens was a fire burnt it all down, and because of that, there's already soil here. The soil didn't disappear, just the plants. So because of that, the pioneer species, like before, were able to come back and help create this community again until it reaches climax community. The only difference is the level of soil did not change very much in this environment because the soil had already been created during primary succession. So just as a recap, primary succession is when it's the first time an environment supported life. Secondary succession was the second time the environment supported life, and that was caused by some natural disaster or man-made event. So now I'd like you to complete the summary and questions.